Picture this. It's early morning, still dark outside. The air in the bathroom is sharp, heavy with silence. Your breath fogs against the mirror, and in that reflection you see a face you know well, familiar, tired, but carrying a hidden hunger for something more. You hover your hand above the faucet, hesitate, then turn it. The rush of water comes alive, and when you touch it, it is ice. Your skin recoils, your body stiffens, your mind screams, "Not today." But you step into it anyway. The cold wraps around you like iron chains, and suddenly you're not just dreaming of transformation, you're practicing it. This moment seems small, maybe even silly, but it carries more weight than most people realize. Because let's be real, how many times have you told yourself, "Next week, I'll begin"? How many mornings have slipped through your fingers while you waited for the perfect alignment? Less stress at work, fewer distractions, the right mood, the right energy. You've whispered promises to yourself again and again, "I'll start when life quiets down." But the truth, life never quiets down. And waiting for calm is the biggest trap of all. The Stoics knew this. They didn't wait for the storm to pass before training. They trained inside the storm. They built resilience by stepping deliberately into hardship. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire surrounded by chaos and criticism, yet his journals show us he welcomed discomfort as an ally, not an enemy. Epictetus was born a slave, yet he taught that the chains on the body mattered far less than the chains on the mind, and those chains could only be broken through discipline. Seneca, rich beyond measure, chose to practice poverty, sleeping on hard floors, eating coarse bread, not because he had to, but because he needed to remind himself comfort can soften a man into weakness. Think of it like this. No blade was ever sharpened by a feather. It must be thrown into the furnace, hammered again and again, then plunged into water so cold it screams. Only then does it gleam. You are no different. Growth demands fire. Strength demands friction. A single chosen discomfort each morning, water colder than you like, silence deeper than you can tolerate, fasting longer than you prefer, is not about pain. It is about preparation. It is about building the quiet conviction that you can endure what others run from. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And here's the uncomfortable truth: most of us waste it in pursuit of ease. We rush toward warmth, toward pleasure, toward distraction. We scroll, we snack, we numb. But what has comfort ever built? Comfort has never forged courage. Comfort has never hardened resolve. Every moment you avoid discomfort, you allow your mind to weaken, to atrophy like a muscle left unused. And here's where Jung's insight strikes deep: people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. That's why silence terrifies us. That's why fasting feels unbearable. That's why cold water makes us panic. It's not the physical sensation, it's the inner confrontation. When the distractions fall away, you are left face to face with yourself, with the fears you've buried under noise, with the truths you've hidden under routine. And for many, that's more frightening than hunger or chill. Pause here. Let that thought settle. What rises when you sit still without your phone? What surfaces when you walk without headphones? That restlessness, that itch to escape it, isn't boredom. It's the raw voice of your soul asking to be heard. And you've avoided it for too long. This is why the Stoics practiced discomfort deliberately. Not to prove how tough they were. Not to cultivate suffering for its own sake, but to prepare for life's inevitable storms. Because here's the thing: storms always come. The job loss, the illness, the betrayal, the silence of someone you love walking away. And when those moments arrive, We don't rise magically to the level of our hopes. We fall to the level of our training. If all we've trained for is comfort, then collapse is guaranteed. Plato said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." And self-conquest begins not in grand victories, but in tiny rehearsals of difficulty. That's what a cold shower is. That's what fasting is. That's what silence is. These are drills. They are mental push-ups. They are the daily flexing of a muscle called resilience. So tomorrow morning, when you face the decision comfort or discomfort, ease or effort, remember every choice is a vote. Every act of avoidance is a rehearsal for fragility. Every act of courage, no matter how small, is a rehearsal for strength. And here's the paradox. The more often you step into discomfort, the less power discomfort holds over you. You stop flinching when challenges appear. You stop making excuses. You stop telling yourself the story that you are too weak, too stuck, too late. With every deliberate act of discomfort, you are rewriting that story. I can do hard things. I choose to do hard things. I am forged in fire. When life throws its storms, you won't need to pretend you're ready. You'll already be ready. You'll carry in your eyes that calm gravity people can't quite explain, but they feel it. They'll sense that something about you is unshakable. And the truth is, it is, because you've already stepped into the fire by choice, and you've already proven to yourself that you can stand there and remain. That's the training. That's the discipline. That's the first step toward becoming unrecognizable in the best way possible. But here's something you don't see coming. After those first small victories, when you've begun to stand taller and feel sharper, another enemy shows up at your door. Not weakness, not laziness. Something more subtle, more seductive: pride. It doesn't arrive shouting. It doesn't arrive obvious. It slides in like a whisper saying, "Look how far you've come. You're different now. Better than before. People should see this. People should know this." And the dangerous part is that some of it is true. You are changing. You are stronger. You've started choosing discomfort over ease, discipline over distraction. Your posture is straighter. Your eyes carry a new calm. People around you may even notice the shift. But here's the trap. The very moment you start believing that you've arrived, the ego begins to take the reins. Just like a crack spreading through marble, invisible at first, but slowly undermining the whole foundation, pride destabilizes what you've worked so hard to build. Aristotle once said that knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. And knowing yourself means being able to see when your need to be right is nothing more than fear dressed in fancier clothing. Fear of being overlooked, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being wrong. The ego feeds on these fears, convincing you that winning arguments, having the last word, or proving your superiority is essential to your worth. But let's be real. How many times have you walked away from an argument victorious only to spend the night replaying it in your head? How many times have you delivered the clever comeback only to feel hollow afterward? That's the trick ego plays. It promises satisfaction, but delivers emptiness. Start here. Let someone else misunderstand you and resist the urge to explain. Let them interrupt you and refuse to wrestle for control of the conversation. Let them mistake your silence for weakness and stay silent anyway. At first, your chest will tighten. Your pride will burn. Your mind will beg you to fight back, to correct, to dominate. But if you sit in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. Your body loosens, your breath deepens, and your identity slowly detaches from the exhausting need to control every perception. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled the most powerful empire on earth, wrote in his Meditations, You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Imagine the weight of those words. Here was an emperor who faced daily criticism, betrayal, political maneuvering. Yet he understood that the real power was not in silencing his enemies, but in mastering his own reactions. Carl Jung offered another layer of wisdom. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That's not just a nice phrase, it's a challenge. Every time someone provokes you, it's a mirror being held up. The irritation points back at something unresolved within you. The sting reveals where you are still fragile. And if you have the courage to look inward instead of lashing outward, you'll discover what still needs healing. Think of it like sparring. Life will keep sending you sparring partners, the colleague who undermines you in meetings, the stranger who cuts you off in traffic, the loved one who pushes your buttons in the exact way that hurts most. You can fight each one, wasting energy in endless battles, or you can treat them as training partners, each interaction a drill in restraint, each irritation a lesson in self-knowledge. And the truth is, strength is rarely loud. It doesn't stomp its feet. It doesn't demand the last word. True strength is quiet, steady, unbothered. It's the ability to let others be wrong without letting it shake you. It's the ability to let silence hold the room, not because you're passive, but because you've chosen peace over pride. Say this to yourself: I choose my peace over my pride. Let the words echo until they feel natural. Because every time you practice that choice, you're teaching your nervous system something profound, that safety doesn't depend on winning. That calm isn't surrendered just because someone misunderstands you. That your worth isn't up for debate. Now pause. Breathe in slowly. Let the air settle deep into your chest. Hold it for a moment. Then exhale longer than you inhaled. Feel the release. That is what happens inside when you stop clinging to the urge to dominate. You begin to notice the stillness beneath the noise, the part of you that remains untouched, no matter what's said around you. And here's where it gets even deeper. Even if you win the argument, even if you prove your point, what have you gained? A momentary high, a fragile satisfaction. At what cost? Your peace, your clarity, your ability to sleep without replaying the conversation on loop. The victory is too expensive. So instead, treat every trigger as a teacher. Treat every misunderstanding as a chance to step back into yourself. Train the pause. Train the breath. Train the silence. That's not weakness, it's mastery. It's a discipline most people never reach, because their pride won't let them. The Stoics didn't waste their days correcting the world. They spent them correcting themselves. That's the difference between the fragile and the unshakable. Fragile people need to be seen as right. Strong people need only to stay true to themselves. And that's the invitation here, to choose stillness over noise, peace over pride, presence over performance. It will never feel easy. Your ego will fight it every time. But if you can practice this discipline, then slowly, quietly, you'll notice something rare. Your chest loosens, your mind clears, and you begin to carry yourself with a gravity that no argument, no misunderstanding, no insult can take from you. That's strength. Not the strength of domination, but the strength of self-mastery. The kind of strength the world can't ignore, not because you demand attention, but because your stillness is magnetic. Here's your anchor. When the weight of the day presses against your chest, when your thoughts loop endlessly like a record stuck on the same crack, there is a way to regain your balance. You rise above it. Not by escaping life, but by shifting your perspective so completely that the noise loses its grip. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself leaving the room you're in. Picture drifting upward until you hover just beneath the ceiling, looking down at your own body, sitting there, shoulders tense, mind tangled. Then rise higher through the roof, past the streets below, until you can see your entire neighborhood. Keep going, your city, your country, the curve of the earth itself. With each layer of distance, the problem that felt unbearable just minutes ago begins to shrink. Think of it like this: the harsh comment you couldn't let go of, the email you kept rereading, the look someone gave you that seemed to cut deep from above, these become whispers in a stadium, grains of sand on an endless shore. You haven't erased them. They're still there. But their scale has changed. Their weight has shifted. And suddenly you can breathe again. Astronauts call this the overview effect. From orbit, when they look back at the planet, they describe a profound stillness, a sense of awe that collapses petty worries into nothing. Marcus Aurelius had no spaceship, but he practiced the same perspective nightly. He wrote to himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do say and think." For him, it wasn't morbid. It was medicine. A way of zooming out until all the false urgency of court politics and imperial pressures dissolved into their proper size. And let's be honest, false urgency runs our lives more than we admit. That message we feel compelled to answer instantly. That meeting we treat like it holds our destiny. That opinion someone throws at us online that suddenly feels like a verdict. In the grand scheme, none of these hold the power we give them. The view from above is how we take that power back. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But examination doesn't mean rehashing every wound or reliving every mistake. It means observing without judgment, understanding, and then releasing. That's what the view from above does. It transforms panic into perspective. Carl Jung once wrote, "People grow like plants in the soil of their past." True enough, but staying buried means we never see the field. Rising above shows us where we've scattered energy, where weeds of worry have crept in unnoticed, where fertile ground lies waiting for attention. It's not about detaching from life, but about finally seeing it clearly. Plato used another image, the chariot pulled by two horses, one representing rational thought, the other raw passion. Without perspective, passion takes the reins and drags us through chaos. But when you rise above reason, steadies the path, guiding the chariot with balance. Perspective is the hand on the reins. Breathe. Inhale slowly. Let the air fill deep into your chest. Then exhale longer than you inhaled. With each breath, imagine the camera pulling back, the frame widening. From this distance, problems don't vanish, but they soften. They shift from towering walls into manageable stones. You can carry them without letting them crush you. And here's the part. Most people miss: practicing the view from above is not about denial. It doesn't mean pretending your struggles don't matter. It means giving them the space they deserve, but no more. It's about holding them with the right weight, no longer letting them dominate every thought. When you do this before bed, something shifts. You lay down not as someone drowning in details, but as someone who has seen the sky. Marcus Aurelius did this every night. He would remind himself of death, of the vastness of the cosmos, of the fleeting nature of all human affairs. And far from making him numb, it made him sharper, kinder, more grounded. He woke each morning not consumed by urgency, but anchored in clarity. That's the gift of perspective proportion. From above, you realize how many of your anxieties are optional, how many hours you've lost defending pride, how many nights you've surrendered to futures that never arrived, how many days you were physically present but mentally absent, consumed by storms of your own creation. The Stoics believed clarity is power. Emotions are natural, yes, but unreliable leaders. They flare, they burn, they fade. Perspective endures. Perspective steadies. Perspective is a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. Each night you rise above, you are practicing. You are reminding yourself, I am not my thoughts. I am not my stress. I am not the sum of my mistakes. I am part of something vast, still unfolding. So tonight, before you close your eyes, let yourself drift upward. See your room from the ceiling. See your city from the sky. See your life from the stars. Notice how small today's anxieties become against the backdrop of eternity, and let that truth soothe you into sleep. Because tomorrow, when the noise returns, you'll carry something rare, the memory of scale, and with it, the ability to meet the day not as someone trapped in the storm, but as someone who knows how to rise above it. That is the view from above. That is the discipline. And that is the freedom most people will never practice. If you're ready to lighten your load, don't start by adding more. That's what most people do. They stack goals like bricks, more tasks, more apps, more hustle. They chase clarity by cluttering their lives with plans. But addition rarely brings clarity. More often, it buries it. The Stoics understood something deeper, that mastery doesn't come from piling on, but from stripping away. So grab a blank page, not to fill with a checklist of ambitions, but to carve out what no longer belongs. Ask yourself, what am I done carrying? Don't list what you want to achieve. List what you refuse to tolerate in your inner world. Write your refusals like boundaries carved in stone. I refuse to explain myself to people who have no interest in listening. I refuse to perform stress just because the world is noisy. I refuse to chase approval when silence would serve me better. Each line is more than ink, it's a declaration of sovereignty. It reclaims territory you've allowed others to invade. It reminds you that most of what drains you isn't what you do, but what you carry, the tension of constantly needing to be understood, the endless compulsion to justify yourself, the wasted energy of saying yes when every fiber of you wants to say no. Think about how much of your exhaustion has nothing to do with action. It isn't the work itself, it's the mental baggage wrapped around it. The constant explaining, the proving, the rehearsing of conversations in your head, the silent pressure to keep up appearances. That's the weight crushing you. Not life, but the noise about life. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But how can you know yourself when your identity is buried beneath layers of performance? When every day is spent trying to convince others of your worth, self-knowledge requires space, a clearing of unnecessary noise. And space only appears when you stop scattering yourself across every demand for attention. Let that be your compass. Don't ask, what will I accomplish this month? Instead ask, what kind of person do I refuse to become? That single pivot changes everything. Suddenly, your calendar isn't a battlefield where tasks fight for dominance. It becomes a sanctuary, a space that reflects your values rather than your fears. Imagine walking into a new month not weighed down by a to-do list, but uplifted by a not-do list. Imagine carrying fewer burdens not because life grew easier, but because you decided to stop carrying what was never yours. You no longer waste your breath explaining visions to those committed to misunderstanding them. You no longer spend nights awake defending your pride against invisible enemies. You no longer perform stress like a badge of honor just because everyone else is. And here's the paradox. Subtraction doesn't make life emptier. It makes it fuller. Fuller of what matters. Fuller of presence. Fuller of values that breathe again because they're no longer suffocated under noise. Week by week, this practice sharpens your identity, not in loud declarations, but in quiet alignment. You stop asking, am I living up to everyone's expectations? And start asking, am I honoring the shape of my own soul? That's when peace stops being a fragile mood that drifts in and out. It becomes a policy, something you enforce through your refusals. Picture it. A friend presses you to explain yourself again and again. Instead of falling into the trap, you calmly say nothing. That is refusal. A colleague tries to drag you into unnecessary drama. Instead of performing outrage, you breathe and step aside. That is refusal. An old habit whispers, "Say yes to this one more thing even though you're already stretched thin." You smile gently and answer no. That is refusal. These small acts feel invisible at first, but they accumulate. They form the architecture of an inner world no longer dictated by noise. And over time, others begin to feel it. They may not be able to name it, but they sense your presence has shifted. You are less reactive, less rushed, less desperate to prove. You move differently, anchored, steady, clear. And look, that's strength most people overlook. Not the strength of taking on more, but the wisdom of carrying less. Not the power of achieving endlessly, but the freedom of refusing what dilutes your spirit. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you do that if every day is spent reacting to things that drag you further from yourself? You can't hear your own voice if it is drowned out by the constant need to explain, defend, and prove. Reverse planning, deciding what you refuse, is the way back. So take that blank page. Write your refusals. Speak them softly if you need to. And each week return to them not to add more but to remember less. Remember the lightness of not carrying what was never yours to begin with. That's not bitterness. That's alignment. That's not laziness. That's precision. The world will keep shouting for you to do more, chase more, achieve more. But true mastery is subtraction. The quiet removal of anything that weakens your presence, dilutes your purpose, or steals your peace. This month, let your greatest achievement be this: not how much you added, but how much you let go. So here's the move. If you want real transformation, don't drown yourself in 30 new habits, or overwhelm yourself with a complicated system. Change doesn't stick when it's scattered. It sticks when it's precise. One act, one ritual, one line in the sand, repeated with quiet consistency until it becomes the backbone of who you are. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't need to impress anyone. What matters is that it's non-negotiable. Maybe it's a silent walk at dawn when the air is crisp and the world is still asleep. The sound of your footsteps becomes a drumbeat, reminding you that you belong to yourself before the world makes its demands. Maybe it's writing a single paragraph in a journal each night, just one honest reflection, no exaggeration, no excuses. Maybe it's the cold shock of water every morning, training yourself to say yes to discomfort before the day even begins. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do not, what you say you'll do." That truth cuts deeper the longer you sit with it. Identity is not formed by intention, but by repetition. Every time you keep the ritual, you are engraving onto your soul the words, "This is who I am now." Place your hand on your heart. Say it silently. "This is who I am." Not because you want to impress anyone, not because you want to perform strength, but because you want to trust yourself. That's the real purpose of a ritual, to give you evidence that when you make a vow, you follow through. And here's the power of one act: resistance shrinks. When you scatter yourself across dozens of new goals, resistance multiplies. Excuses find easy hiding places. But when you narrow your focus to a single ritual, excuses run out of room. You wake each day knowing exactly what matters, not 1,000 shifting targets, but one immovable stone. At first, the act feels like effort. You remind yourself constantly. You push yourself against resistance. But then something subtle shifts. The act becomes rhythm. The rhythm becomes identity, and identity is stronger than motivation. Motivation is weather sunny one day, stormy the next. Motivation waits for mood, for energy, for playlists and quotes. Identity doesn't wait. Identity acts. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Your ritual is the seed of that excellence. Not a scattered sprint, but a slow burn. Not a flash of fireworks, but a steady flame that endures through seasons. Picture it, Marcus Aurelius waking each morning writing not to hype himself up, but to remember who he was. Not to build a performance, but to ground himself in discipline, restraint, and wisdom. His writings were rituals not for the world, but for himself. And 2,000 years later, those quiet words still shape us. That's the power of ritual. Its effects outlast even the one who practices it. And look, people around you may never know what ritual you chose. They may not see the dawn walks, the journaling, the cold showers, but they'll feel it. They'll notice that your tone is calmer, your pace slower, your presence heavier in the best way. They won't know what changed, only that something about you is different, magnetic. Say this to yourself, not to perform, not to impress, just to be. That's the heartbeat of ritual. It's not about proving strength. It's about embodying it. And here's the hidden truth: ritual is a mirror. On days you keep it, it reflects discipline. On days you resist but do it anyway, it reflects resilience. On days you fail, it reflects honesty, because the ritual waits for you tomorrow, not with judgment, but with invitation. That is how trust is built, not in perfection, but in return. Think about it. How many times have you promised yourself change only to watch the promise fade? That's why you no longer believe your own words. But the moment you anchor to one ritual, your relationship with yourself begins to shift. You stop being the person who talks about change, and you become the person who does. One ritual repeated daily is enough to reshape your posture, your habits, your mind. It's enough to rewrite your story from the inside out. Because when life throws storms, you won't be scrambling to prepare. You'll already be anchored by the weight of practice. So choose carefully. Let it be small enough to repeat, but meaningful enough to matter. Let it be something that makes you pause each day and whisper to yourself, "This is who I am becoming." Then do it again tomorrow, and again the next day. Not for applause, not for proof, for alignment, for trust, for identity. Because that's how transformation happens, not through scattered effort, but through a single vow honored daily. A vow so simple, so steady, that it quietly reshapes the way you move through the world. And one day, without needing to announce anything, you'll notice the act is no longer separate from you. It is you. Pause, breathe, and remember. Transformation doesn't arrive in a thunderclap. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It builds slowly, almost imperceptibly, through choices repeated in silence. 30 days from now, when you stand in front of the mirror, you may not even recognize the person staring back, not because the face has changed, but because the energy, the presence, the spirit behind those eyes has been reforged. Look at what you've done. You've trained in discomfort, choosing fire over ease, sharpening your mind where others go soft. You've learned to outsmart ego, practicing silence instead of grasping for the last word. You've floated above your life each night, regaining perspective when the world pressed urgency into your chest. You've stripped away the excess, reverse planning your month by deciding what you refuse to carry. You've chosen one ritual, small, stubborn, steady, and repeated it until it stopped being effort and started becoming identity. And the truth is, these things don't sound extraordinary on paper. Cold showers, quiet walks, honest journaling. boundaries drawn in silence. They seem ordinary, but stitched together day after day, they form a quiet rebellion against a world addicted to noise and distraction. They form the backbone of a life that no longer wobbles with every gust of wind. Let's be honest, this is the kind of strength most people overlook, because it doesn't shine with drama. It doesn't demand applause. It's not about being invincible. It's about being rooted, about knowing that when storms come, you will bend but not break. You will breathe but not collapse. You will hold your center when others spin. Socrates once said, "Be as you wish to seem," and maybe that's the heart of it. Not performing, but becoming. Not pretending to be calm, but actually being calm. Not talking about resilience, but embodying it. The modern trap is to chase extremes louder, faster, bigger. But the Stoic way is subtler, quieter, stronger. It's about living in such alignment that you don't need to declare who you are. People feel it in your presence. Imagine this: someone interrupts you, insults you, tries to provoke you. Where once you would have snapped, now you breathe. Where once you would have argued, now you smile with quiet gravity. Where once your chest would have tightened, now it loosens because you know your worth doesn't depend on winning. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Or picture this: at the end of a long day, you lie down and practice the view from above. You imagine rising your room, shrinking your city, becoming a dot. Your life dissolving into the vastness of the cosmos. The worries that haunted you all afternoon suddenly soften. That email you kept rereading feels small. That careless comment fades into dust. You drift into sleep not because you numbed yourself, but because you remembered your place in something larger. That's not denial. That's clarity. Every practice you've chosen is like a stone dropped into water, sending ripples far beyond the act itself. Cold showers are not about water, they're about training your will. Silence is not about the absence of sound, it's about facing the voice within. Boundaries are not about shutting people out, they're about keeping yourself whole. A single ritual isn't about performance, it's about anchoring identity. These ripples reach further than you realize. They touch how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you respond. And here's something few will tell you: the more you embody this path, the less you will crave recognition for it. At first, you'll want people to notice. You'll want them to say, "You've changed, you're different." But over time, that desire fades. You no longer need the world's approval to confirm what you already know in your bones. Strength becomes self-evident. So here's your reminder: when you drift, and you will drift, you don't collapse. You return. You recommit. Quietly, daily, with grace. That's what separates those who burn out from those who endure. Not perfection, but the discipline of return. The ritual is your anchor. The refusal is your boundary. The perspective is your medicine. Together, they form a life that doesn't spiral but steadies. Think of it like this: in a world addicted to proving, your refusal to prove is powerful. In a culture obsessed with noise, your silence is magnetic. In a society chasing more, your decision to carry less makes you free. You become a paradox people can't quite name: calm in storms, grounded in chaos, untouchable. Not because life is easy, but because you are steady. So 30 days from now, when you look in that mirror, don't expect to see a stranger. Expect to see someone you've always known, but rarely honored, the version of yourself that was waiting beneath the noise. The one who doesn't need applause to feel valuable. The one who doesn't break at the first sign of trouble. The one who is finally trustworthy to others, yes, but more importantly, to yourself. Pause. Breathe that in. This is the transformation. Not a lightning strike. Not a dramatic overhaul. but a series of quiet, deliberate choices stitched together until they become the fabric of who you are. And when people ask what changed, you won't need to explain. You won't need to prove. You'll embody it in your tone, in your eyes, in the calm gravity that fills the space around you. That's the gift of Stoicism, not that life becomes easier, but that you become unshakable. Stay steady, stay sharp, and when you need a reminder, return here. Because the truth is, the person you're becoming, they're already within you. Every choice, every act, every breath is a step closer. And when you look back, you'll realize you are no longer becoming. You already are.